Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. It's Sunday, the 11th of December. It's show number 295, rather amazingly. And what have I got for you in today's news? Well, we'll be looking at the Sacoolas Harry Dunn case and reporting on her suspended sentence. A police stop operation has led to a DVSA investigation into a forged CBT certificate. The e-stepscooter bill is being delayed because the government are still studying evidence and have run out of parliamentary time. I personally have been offered an illegal e-cycle by email. We'll be looking at Shoei, who are showing off a new heads-up helmet. The Royal Enfield are debuting a new 450 platform. We'll talk about wood that's being commemorated to planted rather to commemorate a bike instructor who died on a track day, and a Spanish e-bike firm is showing off two new models. That's Urbet, and we'll also have a quick look at an FIM standard for race helmets, which is being upgraded. And finally, we'll finish up with today's discussion point, which links back to those helmet articles, why there are peaks in transplant rates, which coincide with major US bike rallies. So quite a lot to get through today. It's been a surprisingly busy week for news. So, okay, just very quickly then, thank you very much to all of those of you who looked in on the Science of Being Seen presentation on Wednesday. It wasn't a big audience, but I did get some interesting feedback. And I got an email from Simon Marsh the following morning, and he said, I enjoyed your presentation last night. There are so many well-explained insights that should be compulsory education for all road users. Your new illustration of the items hidden from view on the table is very effective too. That's a really interesting addition actually to Science of Being Seen. It's all about how when we can't see something, we assume there's nothing there, rather than realizing that our view is blocked. If it's not in sight, as far as we're concerned, mentally, it's simply not there. And this is actually really quite an interesting little illustration, which I've popped into the new version of the presentation. He also said he liked the sports psychology visualization section. As he said, I compete in hill climbs, in race cars and once on a motorcycle, and he says where the technique is a key to success. Yes, basically you sit at the bottom and you visualize yourself going around all the bends. And he also reminded me of that very excellent Father Ted small or far away clip. And now he also said, I watch all your shows on YouTube, by the way. I noticed a few weeks ago that the 60-second safety videos are being added under the video drop down tab, and he said I thought you'd given up uploading them. Then he found them under the home tab. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but if you are a 60-second safety follower, those videos are still going up on a regular basis. I'm getting close to 100 of them now. And he said, thanks again for all your work. It's helped my riding and driving more than any IAM or similar training, and I'm passing it on to my son. So there we go. Fantastic recommendation there. So if you did miss the Science of Being Seen, there will be an in-depth version of the presentation in February, and then the next full presentation will be April. And I'm always open, of course, to putting a presentation together bespoke for any group or club. Right, so on with the news. We have Harry Dunn story. Now, as you probably know, Sacoolas, who was the US government employee, fled Britain in 2019 after fatally colliding with the 19-year-old motorcyclist Harry Dunn. Now, she has been handed a suspended sentence for the crash. She pleaded guilty to causing Mr. Dunn's death by careless driving, and she did that by a video link back in October. Now, at the time of the crash, she was driving on the wrong side of the road, but after the incident, she left the country claiming diplomatic immunity, and that was a move that created some tension between the UK and the US governments. An extradition request by the UK was, who was employed by the State Department at the time, was denied. Miss Sacoolas' lawyers later said she'd been working for an intelligence agency. Now, her case was therefore heard by video link, and after being found guilty, she was once again invited to return to the UK for sentencing, which again, something she declined. And on Thursday, she joined the court proceedings from her lawyer's office via a live stream from the US. And she heard the sentencing judge disqualifying her from driving in the UK for 12 months and also sentencing her to 8 months imprisonment, suspended for 12 months. In a statement read out by her lawyer in court, Ms. Sacoolas said that she knows that there's nothing I can say to change what has happened. I only hope that the truth and the resolution to this case will bring a measure of comfort and peace. As always, I remain willing to meet and apologise to Harry's family directly if that would support their healing. Now, on Thursday, the judge, Bobby Chima Grubb, applauded the couple's resilience as she delivered the sentence. And she said there is no doubt that the calm, dignified persistence of these parents and the family of that young man has led through 3 years of heartbreak and effort to your appearance before the court and the opportunity for you to acknowledge your guilt of a crime. The Dunn families filed a civil lawsuit against Ms. Sacoolas in the United States, and that reached an agreement for an undisclosed amount of money last year. So, sad case there. Now, the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, the DVSA, they revealed on Thursday, back in November, DVSA investigators were out with police forces investigating the learner status of certain riders. Now, on Friday, the April, getting it all wrong today, Friday, the 18th of November, I don't know where April came from, Friday, 18th of November, the Met Police and the Sussex Police forces were both out targeting areas with high proportion of learner motorcyclists. And many of the motorcyclists stopped were, perhaps not surprisingly, riders working for delivery companies. And as a result, although the DVSA don't give away much in terms of what the numbers involved were, they did, if I can get this ruddy picture up, there, everything's going pear-shaped this morning. Oh, for God's sakes. I get prepared hours in advance and I can't actually get my picture up that I want to show. Let me try and get the next one up in the sequence. No, it's just not going to go. All right. They seized two motorcycles, which were taken away. They called it a very successful day, as they found a number of riders with license irregularities. Now, the interesting thing about this is that they actually found rather more than just license irregularities. What they actually discovered was that at least one person was riding with a fraudulent CBT certificate. Now, the circumstances of that certainly aren't clear, but what they did say, there's a picture at last of a moped being seized. They did find, as I say, that this is related to a training provider, and they are now looking into that motorcycle training provider. No details, as I said, are given about exactly what has happened, but that's the DVSA's investigation and counter fraud team and their compulsory basic training team doing checks on CBT certificates. So if there are riders out there with dodgy CBT certificates, maybe think about heading off to your local trainer and getting yourself sorted out with a proper certification. Right, who have we got on this morning? Kevin, Clive, Petro and Paul are all here. Good morning, all. Good to see you all. Hope you're not too chilly this morning. Now, you probably recall that back in May, the Queen's speech, the government announced plans for a transport bill that would create new laws covering low-speed, zero-emission vehicles such as e-scooters. I reported on that because obviously it is an area of interest to us. Now, the new bill would also contain new laws to support the expansion of the EV charging network and self-driving cars. However, the new Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, has confirmed this new legislation will not now be put to Parliament during the current session. And that means it won't get a hearing until late next year at the earliest. And even that, quote, obviously depends on parliamentary time being available. Now, why is this? Well, because, quote, the legislative timetable for the entire parliamentary term has been rather transformed by events, and Mark Harper cited the knock-on effects of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine. Something he didn't mention, of course, was the chaotic events that have paralysed the Tory party all summer. The government was also said to be still studying the evidence from the ongoing licensed rental schemes, which began back in 2020, which are helping to gather data for the potential full legislation of the machines. But despite this, the Transport Secretary insisted it's still a DFT priority. Now, the issue of e-scooter legality has previously been raised in the House of Lords, but it was actually debated in the Commons for the first time this week when Labour's Jessica Morden, she's the MP for Newport East, raised the subject in an end-of-day adjournment debate. And she said that the lack of regulation and control over the state of untested and potentially unsafe privately owned e-scooters is a real problem. And she cited evidence of antisocial behaviour of e-scooters, which have been raised by her constituents in Newport, and Newport doesn't have a rental trial scheme. Now, in response, Junior Transport Minister Jessie Norman said, "We recognise the current lack of regulation is at odds with the increasing use of e-scooters," adding that it is essential to ensure that the right regulation designed to create proper accountability and responsibility is in place. Norman said that the evidence and learning from the trials will be published shortly, but that does seem rather unlikely since the trials have actually been extended until May 2024. So that is quite a long time ago, given it is currently Christmas 2022. Now, there have so far been 4 deaths involving the e-scooters that have been part of rental trials. The most recent involved a 12-year-old, Mustafa Nadeem, who died after colliding with a bus in Birmingham earlier this week. Now, all people renting e-scooters are supposed to be 18 years or older and to hold a provisional full driving license. And Norman said that the DFT will be ensuring that we learn lessons from this terrible incident. Well, obviously, the big question is, how did somebody who clearly does not hold a license of any sort and is way under the age actually get hold of one of these bikes? Presumably somebody else rented it and then handed it over to him. Very sad case. The other interesting point there, of course, is the fact that the bill would have contained laws about the EV charging network. And that's all going on the back burner. Why is that? Well, it's a good question, actually, because obviously the government were proposing to put a lot of money into placing charges up and down the country. And with the current financial climate, one would rather suspect that they would be prepared to haul that money back and spend it on something else. Right, okay, so Kevin has just said, good to see the targeting of license irregularities and fraudulent docs. Some may argue we need more action in this area to balance out what some see as disproportionate speed limit enforcement. Well, yeah, I tend to agree, actually. If there are people out there who shouldn't be driving, they shouldn't be driving, full stop. Right, anyway, moving on rapidly, because I've got a lot to get through this morning. Just because something is illegal for use on the road, it doesn't mean, of course, that there aren't plenty of people attempting to sell them. Now, interestingly, I myself got a promotional email targeted at my survival skills work email address from a company offering to sell me some e-bikes with a top speed of 28 miles per hour. Now, you might assume, since that's the legal top speed for a moped, which of course can be ridden by 16-year-olds on a provisional license on L plates, you may assume that it's a sort of motorcycle. But in fact, when I read the description, I found the bike could actually be used via a throttle, as you might expect, but it could also be pedalled or used with pedal assist. So in fact, it's not an e-bike at all. It is one of these things. And again, let me just get the picture up on screen. There it is. That is known as a pedelec, an S pedelec, I should say, more accurately. And basically, these are e-assist bicycles, and they're not motorcycles. They have no proper brakes in terms of motorcycle braking. They have no permanently fitted brake lights. They've obviously got no number plate and so on and so forth, no VIN number, all the rest of the things that make a vehicle a road legal vehicle as opposed to just a cycle. And of course, what this means is that these things are actually completely illegal for use on the road in the UK. Yet here they are being openly sold. They are being promoted across the internet and even reviewed, and this is the really scary bit, by testers out on the UK's public roads. To quote one magazine I found whilst I was researching this little article this morning, one said, zipping up and past the 25 kph UK limit, brackets, don't tell Boris, but you can bypass it by changing to the 30 kph US settings in the app, close brackets, meant we could keep pace with heavy traffic. Well, maybe that is better for the rider, but it's essentially it means they're being used on the road without any of the requirements that should be in place, insurance being one of them. Now, the one magazine does say that, again, quote, S-pedelecs are required by law to be registered under the classification L1E light moped with the DVLA. And then they go on to say that one distributor says they have, again, quote, carried out this process many times, so feel free to contact us for more info. And frankly, I find that very hard to believe, that you could actually convert something that is a bicycle into a registered light moped. I may be wrong, I may have the wrong end of the stick here, but I feel very much that they are probably not fully road legal. Now, with machines like this, as well as private e-scooters still being sold and with warnings about their legal status not always being displayed prominently, particularly on websites of online retailers, Jesse Norman, the Junior Transport Minister, has also written to retailers reminding them of their duty to advise customers about the legal status of these machines. But he should also, frankly, take a pot shot at the various UK magazines which are promoting them. And meanwhile, police chiefs have reminded the public they also have a responsibility to check the rules, and they say that this is important before Christmas for obvious reasons. And they point out again that riders who do use illegal e-cycle or e-scooter on a public road without a license or insurance could face a £300 fine and 6 penalty points for having no insurance, and a £100 and 3 to 6 point fine penalty for an incorrect license. There's also a fixed penalty notice and a £50 fine for riding on the pavement, so it could cost you heavily in the wallet. And of course, the police do have the power to seize illegal vehicles. And Petro says, yes, with more electric cars, we need more chargers on motorways. Absolutely. If the charging structure isn't in place, it's going to make a mockery of the attempts to switch everything to full electric power. That's an interesting point, and I'm sure that one's going to be up for debate on many occasions. Now, don't forget, if you want to catch this show on a regular basis, then remember, it comes out on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, almost always live, occasionally a recorded show. Very, very rarely I've actually missed one because of other commitments. I happen to have noticed, as you may have done, that Sunday is Christmas Day this year, so there is a show scheduled for the 25th. Precisely how I'm going to deal with that, I'm not entirely sure at the moment. It may be a recorded show, or I may do a short live one. If circumstances will develop, no doubt. I know I'm going to be on holiday for that particular day, so I will update you with that as I know more. Don't forget, if you do miss any of these shows, you can head over to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget the all-important UK at the end of it, and you'll find them all over there in a nice, easy to read list. Now, more than 600 trees and 150 bushes will be planted across an acre of land at Crowell in Lincolnshire, and this will create a memorial wood for a motorcycle instructor. Daniel Mayer Wood, 29, was killed at the Frequência de Avalade track in June whilst on holiday in Portugal. I probably mangled my Portuguese pronunciation there. I think I know one word of Portuguese, and it's beer. after he was struck by another motorcycle at that circuit. Now, at the time of the incident, he was riding with his father, Martin, and a post-mortem examination revealed he died from head injuries. Now, Daniel's mum, Rosemary Wood, said, "We've got a couple of acres of land, and because Daniel was our only son, we decided to create a memorial wood for him. He was known as Male Wood, so we thought we'd call the wood that in memory of him." She said that she contacted North Lincolnshire Council. They looked into the possibility of it, and they contacted Humber Forestry, and they are providing all the trees and the bushes to create that wood. So that's quite a nice tribute, I think, to a deceased motorcycle instructor. Now, new section which I'm popping in to Sunday's shows, which is the in case you missed it, last week's videos posts on Facebook. Now, what have I covered? Well, Saturday rather, December the 10th, that's yesterday, I looked at how fast is too fast. That was about riding at night, and that one has got a lot of positive feedback as well, which is good to see. So if you want to find out what I think about speeds at night, go and read that particular post. On Friday, another interesting one that's again got a lot of positive feedback, which I possibly wasn't expecting. I was talking about motorcycles not being the center of the universe and how our own egocentricity can actually put us at risk as we ride on the road. So that was focus on Friday. The Thursday was the video, 60-second safety, and that one was all about group riding on a twisty road. I've left the link out for that one for some reason, but yeah, that was Thursday's post. Then Wednesday it was the ELEVENSES again. Tuesday was a learner lessons tips on Tuesday, and that was all about road surfaces and what we need to look out for. So a good refresher even for experienced riders there. Monday was the December the 5th, and I wrote up one of the items that I covered in the previous ELEVENSES on the 4th of December, which was all about Euro NCAP testing bike safety equipment. And again, that got quite a lot of interesting posts in the comments section from people. So do pop over and have a look at any of those that you missed if you possibly can. They're all on Facebook, or easier to find on my Ko-fi page. So if you do miss anything, that's the place to go. You can find them all over there. Right, okay. Treading on rapidly. Now, motorcyclists are generally fascinated by technology, and one of the holy grails, really, that we've seen sort of being developed over the last few years is the heads-up display in a helmet. Let's try and get that slightly better picture. There we go. That screenshot there was snipped from a glossy promotional video for the Scully helmet, and you probably remember them because I investigated them just a couple of weeks ago as a failed startup, and they're just one of quite a few lost without trace startups which are all plan to put this military style technology into helmets and make life safer for us, allegedly. I've always been a bit skeptical about heads-up displays in helmets, but it seems that Japanese helmet maker Shoei are now going to market with an over-the-counter lid with a heads-up display. The appallingly named Opticson, which sounds like something that dispenses vodka in a CD bar, was first seen as a concept at a technology show in Las Vegas back in 2019. Then in April this year, a prototype was shown at the Osaka motorcycle show in Japan. And now in December 2022, the helmet is available, sort of. Firstly, it's only available for pre-sale, which presumably means they haven't built any yet. And it's only via the Shoei Gallery. I'm not sure what that is, but it's a Japan-only access point, and there are said to be no plans to sell this in other countries yet, presumably because it only has the JIS certification on it. And I'll come on to that in just a moment. Now, it also comes in just two variations. I won't call them colors because they aren't. They are luminous white and matte black, and as we know, white and black aren't colors. And you'll just get them in three sizes too: medium and large and XL. So if you have a particularly large or small head, you're also out of luck. Now, this is actually what it looks like. The projector is mounted down in the helmet's chin piece, and this projects the image onto that semi-transparent angled surface that you can see dropping down in front of the rider's right eye. That's called the combiner. Now, the focus from the projector is set so that the screen image appears to float some distance ahead of the rider. So basically, it remains sharp when the rider is actually looking at the road ahead. Now, the screen is on an adjustable bracket, so it can be individually adjusted up and down or sideways, and it also can be flipped up out of the way. Now, I'm not entirely sure I want a big chunk of plastic and metal stuck on the chin bar of a helmet in any case, but at least you can move the screen. Now, the projector itself connects via Bluetooth to a mobile phone, predictably, and it can display simplified turn-by-turn directions, plus information such as ETA, distance remaining to a destination, etc., all drawn from a navigation app. It'll also display incoming call information and a clock should you need that, but I'm not sure why you would, because most bikes now have a clock in the dash. Now, predictably, of course, the helmet won't come cheap. It'll be setting you back 125,000 yen if you're buying one in Japan, which translates to roughly £750. And on top of that, you will also need a subscription to the premium level of a motorcycle navigation app, which is called Touring Supporter, and that's published by Navitime. And that will set you back a further 800 yen per month. It's just under a fiver, or £48 a year. Now, there's no word on the battery life, but there does appear to be an optional or maybe an additional external battery available. It's not quite clear which that is. And that appears to be around £60, so presumably you're not going to get a full day's riding out of this helmet, or they wouldn't have bothered with a battery. Right. Okay, so heads-up displays. I'd be interested in comments on that. Personally, I think they're a complete waste of time, but hey-ho, as I said, people do love novelties. Now, rumours have been floating around about another novelty, an update to the Royal Enfield Himalayan for a while, and now it appears that rather than just one bike replacing the Himalayan, it's an entirely new platform about to be launched, and the Himalayan will likely be the first machine to appear of a range, which could include a cafe racer, a scrambler, a roadster, and even a fully kitted out rally variant of the Himalayan itself. The Himalayan 450 is likely to appear early next year. That's the predictions, and it's likely to be followed by a 450 roadster to be called the Hunter 450, which will have a similar sort of outline to the existing Hunter 350. And predictably, you can expect a bunch of features like switchable ABS, maybe traction control, digital instrument console, which are increasingly to be found on these bikes. Whilst there's no word on sale dates, test mules have been seen out on the roads, and the 450 is likely to be marketed by Royal Enfield as a more powerful but natural step up from the current 350s. The Rally is a bike that's drawing some interest and a lot of speculation, and the articles online are suggesting it'll probably have a flat seat, a long travel suspension, upside down forks, more ground clearance, and interestingly, one piece of news is that it's going to have tubeless spoked aluminium rims. Now, though that machine is a year or two away at the moment, I'm always interested to see bikes with spoked but tubeless rims. There are far too many motorcycles around that are used on the road with spoke wheels, which still have old-fashioned tubes, which, frankly, we should have done away with. The first tubeless tyres appeared 40 years ago with the CX500. There's absolutely no excuse for bikes still to have tubed tyres, in my opinion. Anyway, the other bikes, Scrambler, likely to have a bigger front wheel and a sort of semi-off-road pattern tyres and higher bars, the sort of thing we've become used to. The Cafe Racer is said to be coming with a small fairing and probably flatter bars. The motor itself is expected to be a major update over the 411cc engine found in the Himalayan. It's expected to be short stroke, which is interesting because that is the kind of Japanese pattern of single cylinder motorcycles, which produce more power but also more revs. It's also said to have dual overhead camshafts too. So the hope is that it will actually put out a bit more power than the 410 motor. So, okay, lots of interesting stuff there from Royal Enfield. They really have made enormous strides to bring their motorcycles up to date. Now, of course, the current range of motorcycles that we're seeing more and more on the road are powered by electricity, and this one comes from a Spanish manufacturer. It's the Marbella-based Urbet, and they already offer a small range of e-bikes, and this is their new Laura, which is going to be available in 2 versions. And it's the standard bike will be the now usual sort of 125 equivalent with a peak power output of 11 kilowatts, which will give it a claimed top speed of around 75 miles per hour. The power for that machine will come from a 7.56 kilowatt hour battery, and that should give the machine a range of around 112 miles max. You can probably cut that down to about 1/3 if you are using it at flat out at highway speeds. That bike should, of course, be available to riders on a provisional license. But it's the second bike which really drew my attention, although it's identical to the one, the base model. The upgraded one gets a 19 kilowatt motor, which increases top speed to around 93 miles per hour. It gets a second 7.56 kilowatt hour battery, which of course doubles the claimed range. Now, whilst the 224 miles is undoubtedly city range, even if you get 1/3 of that, you should still get around 75 miles at highway speeds. And I would say that this machine is actually starting to move into the bracket of becoming a viable machine for typical riding. It's still well short of the kind of range that we'd want for a tourer, but for the average rider, I still think that most of our riding will be available to do on something like that. Now, I've said recently that I think that riders are going to have to sort of recalibrate their thinking around e-bikes and accept that the performance of bikes like this is something more akin to a 300cc ICE bike, and I think that'll be the new norm for an average motorcycle. I think that the holy grail, which is 200 kilometer range, 200 kilometer top speed, and 200 kilograms in weight, I think that looks pretty much unobtainable, at least with current electric technology and battery technology, and at anything like an affordable price. Individually, you can get any of them. You can certainly get the range, but you won't do it at high speed. You can get the high speed, but you won't get the range. And if you want the range and the speed, you're certainly not going to get anywhere near the 200 kilogram weight limit. There are interesting projects out there, but I think that for an affordable motorcycle, an electric motorcycle, this is the sort of thing that we'll probably be looking at. Now, Urbet says that it is expanding on the international market and they will be launching in Italy soon, but there's no word whether we'll get to see it in the UK, although the bike already is on will go to Spain, Germany, Portugal, and the United Arab Emirates, where they have a distributor network already. Deliveries should begin before the end of this year. If it does make its way here, though, it won't be too expensive. It will come in at around £10,000, which I think is a pretty decent price point for electric motorcycles. All right, as I said, got a lot to get through this morning. But if you do want to support my show, do feel free to pop over to my Ko-fi page. You can access hundreds of better biking tips over there. And for the price of a cuppa, you'll get a month's access to that. Well, there's 800, I think, at the moment, better biking articles from 2014 right up to current. And I'm currently putting the 2020, I think it is, year up in place. So do pop over there, and a cuppa is much appreciated and keeps me coming back and creating new shows for you. Right, okay, so helmets then, on to helmets. I've already mentioned the heads-up display. Well, coming back to them, because depending on where you live in the world, there are several different standards for helmets. Now, here in the UK, we apply the UN ECE standard. That's also used across Europe. The US has its own minimum DOT, Department of Transport standard, and the higher SNEL rating. And in Japan, there is the JIS certification. Now, here in the UK, we've also had the ACU standard, which you may know about. It's an extra level of tests carried out by the Autocycle Union, which oversee motorcycle sport in this country. And if you venture out onto the track in an ACU organised event, your helmet must have an ACU sticker on it. And at the top level of competition, the FIM has its own set of regulations for circuit racing. Now, these were introduced in 2019 for MotoGP events, and then to other FIM circuit racing in 2020. And 2026 will actually see the introduction of a new, tougher standard, and that will be required across almost all FIM motorcycle sports, including off-road championships. And the FIM says their first aim is always the safety of their riders. Now, the new protocol is set out in the easy to remember, the FRHPHE -02 regulations. Now, testing to these new standards will be phased in. The test will be available from January 2023, and there is a recommendation that racers' helmets should comply from 2025. But compliance will be mandatory in FIM racing events in 2026. The only exceptions being trials events or events involving pedelecs, side-by-side vehicles, and oddly enough, streamliners in land speed record attempts. So how will they do this? Well, basically, they'll take helmets that are already approved to the existing road standards. That is the ECE 2206, the JIS standard, or the latest SNEL standards, and then add a raft of new impact tests, which will be repeated and at higher speed too. And they will also apply the same penetration tests that are also required by the previous FIM standard. And cheap pads will also need to be quick release, which is interesting. So compliant helmets will be identified by a QR code that'll be sewn onto the chin strap of the helmet, and that'll link you to the homologation certificate for that model, but it will also individually identify that helmet so it can be tracked as it's used across various events. Right, so that's what the FIM intend for helmets. Interesting about the tracking thing, actually. That's obviously it can keep track of how many times a helmet's been used. Now, do you want to know why surgeons refer to bikers as organ donors? Here's my final piece for the day. Well, it's basically because head injury is still a major cause of fatalities following a motorcycle crash. And as many states in the US have either no or limited helmet laws, the fatalities attending the large biker rallies in the US have actually been found to boost organ donations and thus transplants. And this is the result of a recent Harvard-led study. Now, a common source of deceased donor organs is traumatic injury from motor vehicle accidents generally, and they accounted for 11% of all organ donors in 2011. And motorcyclists, especially those not wearing a helmet, of course, are disproportionately more likely to die in a crash compared with the occupants of a passenger vehicle. Now, according to the study, which also involved researchers from the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, in the regions in which the 7 largest US bike rallies were held between 2005 and 2021, there were 21% more organ donors per day on when the rally was actually occurring compared with the days just before or just after the rally. They got this data by analysing no less than 10,798 organ donors and 35,329 organ recipients in the areas where those rallies took place. They also found 26% more transplant recipients per day on average during those events, and the average number of organs used was about 3 per donor. The spike in organ donations and transplantations that we found in our analysis are disturbing, even if not entirely surprising, because they signal a systemic failure to avoid preventable deaths, which is a tragedy, said Dr. David Cron, the study's primary author, in a press release. Cron, he's a medical school clinical fellow at Harvard, who's actually working in surgery at the Massachusetts General Hospital. He said, whilst there's a clear need for better safety protocols around such events, a need also exists to be aware of the potential for increased organ donors at these events. Co-authors Dr. Grace Yuan Zhang and Dr. Mitchell H. Katz said one donor has the potential to save up to 8 lives, depending on how their organs are allocated: 2 kidneys, 2 pieces of liver, 2 lungs, a pancreas, and a heart. And if organs from one donor are distributed to 6 different recipients, one death is able to provide 55.8 additional life years for organ recipients. The 7 motorcycle rallies they studied each attract over 200,000 visitors over the course of the rally, and Daytona Bike Week in Florida and the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in South Dakota are both 10-day events that each draw around 500,000 visitors. So there you have it. That is why motorcyclists are referred to as organ donors. Oh yes, Martin looked in. I meant to say hello, Martin. And he says it's my e-bike works fine for my use, but nowhere near what you suggested: 120 kilometer range, 120 kilometers per hour, and 130 kilograms. For a dual sport, it's decent. For me, it's practical. Yeah, I think that's the sort of performance that we are going to see more and more of. That is pretty much what I just said, the sort of 70 miles and top speed. That's the 125 equivalent. A little bit more, up to 90 miles per hour, I think is doable within that 200 kilogram weight limit that I was talking about. And I think that will be, for the foreseeable future at least, pretty much the standard that we're going to see e-bikes developed to. All right, so that is it for today's show. Thank you all for looking in. Don't forget, the next events are going to be it's the sports psychology visualization that I did mention briefly on Science of Being Seen and got some positive feedback on Wednesday. There'll be a full talk about how we can use sports psychology techniques and how we can learn not to blaze penalties over the bar in a vital moment of a football match, but also how we can apply it to our riding. So do look in. That will be the second Wednesday in January, which is the 11th. That'll be 8 o'clock. The link to book that up is up in the preamble. And then when we get to February, I'll be doing an in-depth look at day riding lights, how they're tested, how they're designed, and what likely to work, what is practical to apply. So those are the 2 talks that are coming up. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for looking in. If you are out there today on your bike, take it easy. It's a frosty start in London here this morning. The ice has just about thawed on the roofs opposite. It looked like a winter wonderland outside, actually. So yeah, wrap up warm, and if you are out there on your motorcycle, make sure that you stay shiny side up.